My son-in-law gave me an ultimatum. Obey me or get out of the house. My daughter nodded silently, betraying everything I had done for them. I packed my suitcase and left to carry out my plan. 3 days later, I had 111 missed calls. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I signed away my reputation across a polished conference table that Tuesday morning, and by dinner, I learned exactly what it had bought me. Marcus Chen studied the portfolio spread between us, his expression skeptical. The photos showed residential work. Small yards, basic flower beds. Nothing like the Gateway Commercial Plaza project he was developing. Eldon, you know I trust your judgment, but this kid's portfolio is thin. You sure about this? I met his eyes, kept my voice steady. He's family. I'm vouching for him personally. He won't let you down. Marcus leaned back, tapping his pen against the contract. $180,000. The landscaping scope included native plant installations, irrigation systems, hardscaping for 3 acres. Clifford had the equipment, barely, and a crew of 2. I was betting my 35-year reputation on potential rather than proof. All right, Marcus said finally, extending his hand. For you, Eldon. But if this goes sideways, it won't. I shook his hand, firm and confident, though something in my chest tightened. I was burning bridges for my son-in-law, hoping Alma's marriage would stabilize if Clifford felt successful, hoping my daughter would smile again the way she used to. The drive home through Portland's afternoon traffic gave me time to rehearse how I'd tell them. Casual, not like I'd called in a major favor, just helping family. By the time I turned onto my street in Portland Heights, I'd convinced myself they'd be grateful. I entered through the front door around 6, juggling my briefcase and keys. Voices drifted from the living room, Clifford's low tone, Alma's lighter response. I paused in the hallway, setting my briefcase down quietly, preparing to join them. The old man finally did something useful. That contract is exactly what I needed. I froze. My hand tightened on the doorframe. Alma's laugh came soft, almost conspiratorial. He still thinks he's important. The words landed like physical blows. I stood there, hidden by the wall, listening to them dissect me. My breathing went shallow. The briefcase handle had left a red mark on my palm. I didn't announce myself, couldn't. I walked to my bedroom instead, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed. 22 years I'd owned this house, paid every mortgage statement on time, and now I was the old man who finally did something useful. Dinner at 7 was torture masked as normalcy. Emma was already asleep, which meant no buffer of a 3-year-old's chatter, just 3 adults, and the weight of what I'd overheard. I pushed food around my plate, trying to find an opening. Finally, I was thinking about adding built-in bookshelves in the living room. The contractor could start next month. Clifford's fork stopped midway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, deliberately. That's our decision to make. You just live here. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. I looked up, saw him watching me, arms crossed, expression cold. This is my house. My voice came out controlled, each word measured. I've owned it for 22 years. Clifford leaned back in his chair, occupying space like he owned it. His eyes never left mine. Listen to me, or get out. The ultimatum hung between us, sharp and final. I turned to Alma, desperate. Alma, say something. She stared at her plate. Her hands trembled slightly, gripping her fork. I watched her jaw tighten, watched her make the decision in real time. She looked up just enough to meet my eyes, then nodded. Slow, deliberate. Agreement. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the silence. I didn't throw anything, didn't raise my voice. I walked to my bedroom with what dignity I could gather, closed the door, and sat in the dark. Through the wall, I heard their voices resume. Normal conversation. A laugh. They'd moved on already, as if I'd never been at the table. My eyes fell on the photograph on the nightstand. Alma at 6 years old, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera. I'd taken her to the zoo that day. She'd called me her hero. That little girl felt like someone I'd invented, someone who'd never existed at all. Through the wall, their laughter drifted into my dark room, and I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. Morning light came, but the decision was already made somewhere in those sleepless hours. I lay on top of the covers, still wearing yesterday's clothes, staring at ceiling textures I'd watched painters apply 15 years ago. From the kitchen came sounds of breakfast, cabinet doors, running water, Emma's voice asking about cartoons, normal domestic rhythms that now felt like they belonged to strangers. I couldn't stay another night, not as a tolerated guest in my own house. By 9, I had my suitcase open on the bed. I packed methodically. A week's worth of clothes, toiletries, laptop, the folder of important documents I kept in my desk drawer. I left most of my belongings untouched. This wasn't surrender. This was strategic withdrawal. From downstairs, a television blared suddenly. Football pregame show, volume unnecessarily loud. Clifford, making sure I knew he was comfortable, settled, claiming territory. I folded a shirt with precise creases, placed it in the suitcase. My hands didn't shake. I wouldn't give them that. Footsteps in the hallway. I looked up to see Alma standing in the doorway, eyes red and swollen. She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't speak, didn't step inside. Just stood there, watching me pack, crying silently like her tears alone could communicate what she refused to say aloud. I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound felt final. By 11, I was ready. I carried the single bag down the stairs, each step deliberate. In the living room, Clifford sprawled across the leather couch. My couch, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy. Feet propped on the coffee table. Beer in hand, despite the morning hour, he stared at the television screen, jaw working on chips, and didn't acknowledge my presence. Didn't even glance over. The dismissal was more effective than words. Alma stood at the kitchen threshold, frozen between rooms, between loyalties. Her hands gripped the doorframe until her knuckles went white. "Grandpa!" Emma ran from somewhere behind Alma, barreling toward me with that fearless 3-year-old energy. I set down the suitcase, knelt to her level, caught her in a hug that threatened to crack my composure. "Where are you going?" Her small hands patted my cheeks. "Grandpa has to go away for a little while, sweetheart. But why?" Sometimes grown-ups need space. I kissed her forehead, breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you." I stood, picked up my suitcase, and walked out my front door. Closed it behind me with a quiet click. Stood on the porch I'd built myself, stained myself, maintained for over 2 decades. The finality of it hit me then, standing outside looking at my own house like a visitor. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, before I could make myself drive. Downtown Portland had furnished apartments advertised on every third corner. I chose one that didn't ask questions. $200 a month, month-to-month lease, available immediately. The landlord, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, barely looked at my ID before handing me the paperwork. "Month-to-month, okay? Most folks want yearly leases." "Month-to-month is perfect," I said, signing my name in careful script. "I won't be here long." She gave me keys, pointed to the 3rd floor. I paid $2,400 on my credit card, first month, deposit, and climbed stairs to a space so small and sterile it felt like a hotel room someone forgot to decorate. I set my suitcase on the unfamiliar bed and sat beside it. The silence was absolute. No Emma's laughter, no television noise, no sound of Alma moving through rooms, just me and the magnitude of what had happened. That first day blurred into evening. I unpacked mechanically, ordered food I couldn't eat, stared at my phone. No calls, no messages. They'd erased me efficiently. I didn't sleep. Day 2, I walked. Miles of Portland streets, past shops and cafes, parks and office buildings. Everything felt distant, like watching life through thick glass. I found myself standing outside my landscape architecture firm around noon, staring at the door, unable to go in. Couldn't face my employees, their questions, their pity. I returned to the studio as light faded. My phone remained silent. Day 3 morning, the text came. "Dad, I'm sorry. Just give us some time." I read it 3 times, stood in the middle of my rented room, reading Alma's words over and over until they stopped making sense. "Give us some time?" I said aloud to the empty apartment. "In my house?" The audacity of it struck me like cold water. Give them time. To what? Enjoy my home? Settle into my furniture? Decide whether they'd permit me to return? I set the phone down hard on the small table, grabbed my laptop, started pulling up documents I'd stored digitally, house deed with my name alone on the title, 22 years of mortgage statements showing every payment I'd made, utility bills spanning decades, all bearing my name and my bank account numbers. I spread papers across the table, tracing my finger down dates and amounts, evidence of ownership, proof of investment, documentation of a life built board by board, payment by payment. A thought crystallized, sharp and clear enough to cut through the fog I'd been living in. Why did I leave my house? I leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, staring at the deed, my property, my equity, my investment, and I'd walked away from it because Clifford told me to. The victim mentality that had wrapped around me for 3 days began cracking. Underneath it, something harder emerged. Anger, yes, but more than that. Purpose, clarity. I picked up my phone, looked at Alma's text one more time, and didn't respond. Instead, I set it down next to the house deed, both of them reminders of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't the one who needed to leave. The fourth night was different. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was calculating. I lay on top of the unfamiliar bedspread, staring at shadows from streetlights crawling across the ceiling. My mind wouldn't stop, but tonight the repetition felt productive rather than destructive. I was seeing the pattern now, each memory clicking into place like evidence at a crime scene. 3 years ago, Alma called. "Dad, I'm pregnant. Clifford says we need help with the nursery, just until Emma arrives." I'd said yes immediately. What grandfather wouldn't? 6 months later, Clifford, over dinner. "We're saving for a down payment. This market, though, need another few months." I'd nodded, understanding. Housing prices were insane. 1 year in, casual mention. "Market's still terrible. You don't mind us staying a bit longer, right?" I'd waved it off. Family helps family. 2 years. Clifford announcing, not asking. "We should paint the house. I'm thinking gray." My house. His color choice. Each memory showed me shrinking, from owner to host to invisible man in my own home. And I'd paid for everything. Every single expense while Clifford built his business. I sat up as dawn broke, energized rather than exhausted. Grabbed my laptop, typed into the search bar. "Real estate lawyer, Portland, Oregon." Reviews scrolled past. I read carefully, looking for someone who understood property disputes, family conflicts. One name stopped me, Ruth Walsh, specializing in property rights and family real estate conflicts. Free initial consultation. Her photo showed a woman around my age, silver hair, sharp, intelligent eyes. I clicked request appointment, filled out the form, hit submit before doubt could creep in. Confirmation appeared. Next available, tomorrow, 2 p.m. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from possibility. The next afternoon, I stood outside Ruth Walsh's office in northwest Portland. Modest brick building, well maintained. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, too nervous to sit in my car. The waiting room smelled like old books and fresh coffee. Legal volumes lined the walls. At exactly 2, a door opened. "Mr. Cruz?" Ruth Walsh was early 60s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, navy suit that spoke of competence without pretension. Her handshake was firm, testing. "Come in, please." Her office was organized but lived in. Diplomas from Lewis and Clark Law School, family photos on the credenza. She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk. "Tell me what brought you here. Start wherever feels right." I talked for 20 minutes. Didn't plan to. Just opened my mouth and everything poured out. The contract favor. Clifford's contempt overheard in my hallway. The dinner ultimatum. Alma's silent nod that broke something fundamental. Walking out of my own house with one suitcase. Ruth listened without interrupting. Took occasional notes. Her expression stayed neutral. Professional. But I caught something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Like she'd heard versions of this before. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, "Let me make sure I understand. You own the house outright? Mortgage completely paid?" 22 years of payments. Finished 3 years ago. "Only your name on the deed?" "Never added anyone." She leaned back, tapped her pen against her notepad. "Mr. Cruz, you have strong legal standing, But I need to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? This is your daughter, your grandchild. I didn't hesitate. I want my house back. Something shifted in her expression. Approval, maybe. Good. Certainty matters in these cases. Judges can sense ambivalence. She explained Oregon law with the same clarity she'd probably used 100 times. For family members living without a written lease agreement, I had to provide 30-day written notice terminating their tenancy. If they didn't leave after 30 days, I could file formal eviction through the court. Total process, 60 to 90 days. First, she said, pulling out a legal pad, we gather documentation, bank statements proving you paid all expenses, tax records, utility bills, everything in your name. Then we send the notice. If they contest, we're ready with evidence. She quoted her retainer. $3,500 upfront, covering notice preparation, initial filing if needed, first court appearance. Additional work, billed at $250 per hour. I pulled out my checkbook without hesitation, wrote the amount, tore the check cleanly, slid it across her desk. My hand was steady. Ruth accepted it, then said something unexpected. Mr. Cruz, I've handled dozens of these cases. The hardest part isn't the law. It's holding your resolve when family pressures you. Begging, crying, threats, manipulation. Can you do that? I thought of Alma's face at that dinner table, her slow nod of agreement with Clifford's ultimatum. They already did their worst, threw me out of my own home. What's left? Ruth's slight smile told me I'd passed some test. We'll find out. She handed me a printed list, documents to gather, timeline to follow, communication protocols. Everything goes through her unless absolutely necessary. She'd start drafting the 30-day notice immediately. Review appointment next week. At the door, she added, one more thing. This will get ugly before it gets better. Steel yourself. I paused, looked back at her. I'm already steel. I left Ruth's office with a checklist in my pocket, and for the first time in 2 weeks, a sense of direction that felt like solid ground beneath my feet. I'd spent 3 years paying for everything while they contributed nothing. Now I had 1 week to prove it, in terms a court would understand. The checklist Ruth gave me became my constant companion. Each morning I'd review it, checking off items as I collected them. Bank statements going back 3 years, requested online, downloaded systematically. Property tax records from the county website. Utility bills from provider accounts, all bearing my name. I created a spreadsheet, couldn't help myself. Landscape architecture had trained me to think in organized systems. Column 1, date. Column 2, expense type. Column 3, amount. Column 4, proof document. The numbers accumulated with brutal clarity. Mortgage payments before payoff. Property taxes, $6,200 annually. Homeowners insurance, $1,800 yearly. Utilities averaging $400 monthly. Maintenance, repairs, improvements. Total over 3 years, $85,400. Contributed by Clifford and Alma, 0. The spreadsheet told a story clearer than any argument I could make. Midweek, while searching old emails for documentation, I found something else. Messages from Clifford I'd forgotten about, requests for temporary help with bills. March 2023. Dad, can you cover the electric this month? Big deal closing soon. July 2023. Need $500 for Emma's daycare. We'll pay back next week. December 2023. Could you handle property taxes this year? Cash is tight with holiday expenses. None of it repaid. Ever. Temporary had become permanent, and I'd been too accommodating to notice. I forwarded the emails to Ruth. Her response came within an hour. Perfect. Print and save. Shows pattern of financial dependence. Thursday afternoon, Ruth called. I ran Clifford through public records. Standard due diligence for these cases. Found something interesting. I set down my coffee. What? 4 unpaid judgments from creditors. Total $28,000. 2 credit card companies, 1 auto loan default, 1 unpaid business debt. Dates ranging from 2022 to 2024. I sat there processing. $28,000 in debt while living rent-free in my house? This might explain why he's so determined to stay, Ruth continued. He has nowhere else he can afford. You've been his financial shelter. After hanging up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Clifford's contempt suddenly made more sense. I wasn't just convenient, I was necessary, and people resent those they depend on. Friday morning, my phone chimed. Text from Alma. A photo, her and Emma both smiling. Emma held a crayon drawing, crude stick figures, one labeled Grandpa in Alma's handwriting. Caption beneath, "She asks about you every day." I stared at Emma's face. The ache in my chest was immediate and sharp, but I noticed what the message didn't say. No apology, no acknowledgement of what happened, just emotional manipulation through my granddaughter. I typed carefully, "Tell her Grandpa loves her very much." Nothing about coming home, nothing about forgiveness, just the truth. I loved Emma. That hadn't changed. What had changed was my willingness to be a doormat to stay close to her. Saturday, I delivered everything to Ruth's office. 3-ring binder organized by category with color-coded tabs. Bank statements, property deed, tax records, utility bills, email printouts, maintenance receipts. Ruth flipped through it, impressed. "This is prosecution-level documentation. If they contest anything, we're ready." She showed me the notice, formal legal language citing Oregon revised statutes, giving Clifford and Alma until a specific date, 30 days out, to vacate the premises. I read it twice. My hand trembled slightly when I signed the authorization. Just a tremor, but Ruth noticed. "Second thoughts?" "No." I steadied my grip, just making it real. "Monday morning," she said. "My paralegal sends this certified mail with return receipt. 2 copies. One to Clifford, one to Alma. Legal protocol requires both residents receive notice." Monday came. Ruth texted, "Notices sent. Delivery scheduled for this afternoon." I tried staying distracted. Went to my landscape architecture office for the first time since everything happened. Reviewed project bids. Talked to my staff about upcoming installations. Acted normal. But my phone stayed in my pocket. Volume on. I was waiting. 4:30. I was at a coffee shop reviewing paperwork when my phone started vibrating. Continuously. I pulled it out. Missed call from Alma. Another. Clifford's name. Again. Unknown numbers, him trying different phones probably. I set the phone on the table, watched it light up like something possessed. Didn't answer, didn't call back. Just watched. Within 3 hours, 111 missed calls. I counted them. Text messages flooded in. "Call me!" "What is this?" "Dad, please. You can't do this." I sipped my coffee. Let them panic. Ruth had been clear. No direct communication. Everything through her. By 8, the phone finally went quiet. One voicemail notification. From Alma. I waited 10 minutes before listening. Steeled myself. Her voice was wrecked. "Dad, we got a letter from your lawyer. It says we have to leave in 30 days. Is this real? How can you do this to us? To Emma? Please call me. Please. We need to talk. This has to be a mistake." I listened to it once. Deleted it. Set the phone down. Her desperation was genuine. But she still didn't understand, or wouldn't acknowledge, what they'd done. No mention of Clifford's ultimatum. No reference to her silent betrayal. Just shock that I was fighting back. I opened my laptop, emailed Ruth. They received the notice. As expected, panic. Her response came immediately. "Don't engage. All communication through me." "You're doing great." AI typed back. "Understood. They can call all they want. I'm not answering." I leaned back in the apartment's uncomfortable desk chair. For the first time since that dinner, since before the ultimatum, a genuine smile crossed my face. Not happiness exactly. Something harder than that. Satisfaction. The feeling of someone who's been pushed around finally pushing back. They'd spent 3 years treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. And now, watching my phone finally go silent, I realized they were just beginning to understand what that decision would cost them. The next evening, when Alma's name lit up my screen again, I was ready. I let the phone ring twice before answering. Not hesitation, control. "Dad!" Her voice exploded through the speaker, raw and hysterical. "How can you evict us? We're your family. We have a child." I stayed silent, let her exhaust herself with words tumbling over each other, breath hitching between sobs. Then I heard the struggle, Alma's protest, the phone changing hands. Clifford's voice came on, attempting calm but strained underneath. "Listen, we can work this out. Just talk to me." My tone came out ice. No anger, no emotion, just facts. I sent an official 30-day notice to terminate residency. You have 1 month to find other housing. The house is mine. His breathing changed. I could hear the shock that I wouldn't negotiate, wouldn't soften. You can't be serious. We have rights. Exercise them. My lawyer's waiting. His voice rose to a shout. You'll regret this. I'll sue. You won't see Emma ever again. The threat about Emma landed hard somewhere in my chest. But I didn't argue. Simply, see you in court. I hung up. The next afternoon, Clifford texted demanding an in-person meeting. Ruth advised against it when I called her, but I agreed, on my terms. I chose a coffee shop in northwest Portland. Afternoon, weekday. Witnesses present, professional environment. I arrived first, took a table with my back to the wall, clear view of the entrance. Clifford and Alma arrived 15 minutes late. Power play attempt. Clifford wore a suit, trying to appear successful. Alma's eyes were red and swollen. They sat across from me. The table became a battlefield. Clifford started with pressure. This is ridiculous. We're family. You're destroying relationships over a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? I kept my voice level. You told me to obey or leave. I left. Now I'm taking back what's mine. He switched tactics. False reasonableness. I was having a bad day. You know how stress affects people. Can't we just reset? I stayed silent. Let him flounder. Then bargaining. What if we pay rent? We can work out an agreement. You haven't paid for anything in 3 years. Why would that change? His voice dropped, almost pleading. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have money for deposits and first month's rent. Throughout this, Alma said nothing. She stared at her untouched coffee, tears streaming silently. I watched her realize something. Maybe what her silence at that dinner had cost. She wasn't defending Clifford anymore. She was drowning in understanding that she'd chosen wrong, but it was too late. I addressed her directly. Alma, 3 years ago, I welcomed you into my home when Emma was born. I paid for everything while Clifford built his career. I asked for nothing but basic respect. Instead, you watched him throw me out and said nothing. Her voice came barely audible. Dad, I was scared. Of what? Of standing up for your father? That's exactly why I'm doing this. Sensing he was losing, Clifford played his last card, leaned forward, voice low and threatening. You want to play hardball? Fine. You'll never see Emma again. We'll move across the country if we have to. She won't even remember you. The coffee shop noise faded. I stood slowly, picked up my jacket, looked at Clifford with something close to pity. Using your daughter as a weapon. That tells me everything I need to know about you. I looked at Alma. And you're going to let him? Her face crumpled, but she didn't contradict him. I walked out, leaving them at the table. Behind me, I heard Alma's voice. What have we done? Outside, I paused to breathe. My hands shook slightly. The Emma threat had hit hard, but I didn't turn back. Through the window, I could see Alma crying harder, saying something to Clifford. For the first time, she looked angry at her husband rather than scared. Clifford looked defensive, argumentative. The crack in their united front was showing. I walked to my car, pulled out my phone. Texted Ruth. Meeting done. Clifford threatened to keep Emma from me. Should I be worried? Her reply came within seconds. Document everything. Empty threats can backfire in custody situations. I realized then, Clifford had just made a strategic error. Through the coffee shop window, I watched Alma gesturing angrily at Clifford. The first time I'd seen her fight him instead of hide from him. And I knew something had shifted that couldn't be undone. The envelope from Multnomah County Circuit Court arrived 7 days after I'd walked out of that coffee shop, and my first thought was, here it comes. I stood in my apartment building's lobby, sorting mail. Between landscape project plans and junk mail, the county seal caught my eye. Official. Ominous. Exactly what Clifford had threatened. I opened it right there. Lawsuit. Clifford was suing me for wrongful eviction, demanding $50,000 in damages for emotional distress and relocation expenses. The complaint alleged we had an oral agreement for indefinite residence. I photographed every page with my phone, texted them to Ruth. Her response came within minutes. Don't worry. Typical intimidation tactic. No merit. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Ruth's office felt familiar now. Comfortable in a way that surprised me, she had the lawsuit printed out already, marked with highlighter and margin notes. This is what desperate people do when they have no leverage. She flipped pages. He's claiming oral agreement, emotional distress, implying you violated tenant rights. Problem for Clifford. Oral agreements require evidence. He has none. You have documentation of ownership and that you paid everything. How long will this delay the eviction? Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. When the judge dismisses his suit, which is highly likely, your eviction proceeds. If anything, this helps us by showing his bad faith. Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared. Ruth organized evidence into presentation format, timeline of events, financial records, email trail of Clifford's temporary requests, absence of any written agreement, deed showing sole ownership. She drafted a response brief citing Oregon property law, precedents for owner-occupied homes, burden of proof for oral contracts. One afternoon, she coached me. If you testify, be factual. No emotion, just dates, amounts, documents. Let the evidence speak. The hearing day arrived. Multnomah County Courthouse, downtown Portland. I wore a suit, arrived with Ruth 30 minutes early. Clifford appeared with a lawyer who looked unprepared. Thin manila folder versus Ruth's organized binder. We sat at opposite tables. The judge entered. Older woman, no-nonsense demeanor. Clifford's lawyer presented first, rambling about family hardship, good faith reliance on father-in-law's generosity, understanding of permanent arrangement, no documentation, just verbal claims. Ruth's turn was methodical. She projected the deed on a screen, my name only, showed bank statements, all payments by me, displayed emails, Clifford requesting temporary help, promising repayment, pointed out the absence of any written agreement. 7 minutes. That's all it took. The judge's questions were sharp. Where's your evidence of this oral agreement? Witnesses? Written communications reflecting the terms? Clifford's lawyer fumbled. Your Honor, it was understood between family members. Good faith reliance. Understanding isn't evidence. The judge looked at the documents Ruth had submitted. Plaintiff's claim is dismissed. No evidence of oral agreement. Defendant's eviction notice is valid and enforceable. The 30-day notice remains in effect. Plaintiffs must vacate by the date specified in the notice. The gavel struck. 30 minutes total. Outside the courthouse, I felt lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. Ruth smiled. Genuine, not just professional. That was textbook. Clifford's lawyer should have advised him not to file. We walked toward the parking garage. Ruth paused. Do you have plans? I know a coffee place nearby. Good coffee, better than the courthouse cafeteria. I recognized this wasn't just professional courtesy. I'd like that. We walked 3 blocks to a small cafe, sat by the window. Conversation started about the case but drifted. Ruth asked about my landscape architecture work, genuinely interested, asking follow-up questions. I asked about her law practice, how she'd ended up specializing in property disputes. Coffee became 90 minutes. Ruth mentioned she'd lost her husband 5 years ago to cancer. Like my wife, gone, leaving a void. Both of us had thrown ourselves into work afterward. Professional success, personal loneliness. We discovered we both loved classic films. Ruth mentioned Casablanca. I lit up. One of my favorites, The Sacrifice at the End. We both enjoyed hiking. Ruth, I haven't gone since my husband died. We used to hike Mount Hood trails every summer. I stopped too, I said. Didn't seem right going alone. The conversation had depth that surprised both of us. Not small talk. Real connection between 2 people who'd been through loss and understood what it meant. As we prepared to leave, Ruth said something that shifted everything. Eldon, I want to tell you something professional first. You're doing the right thing. Not the easy thing. The right thing. Fairness isn't cruelty. It's restoring balance when someone has taken more than their share. She paused. But personally, I admire your strength. Most people would have stayed and let themselves be walked over. You chose dignity. I met her eyes. I had a good lawyer who believed the law mattered. And I have a good client who believes he deserves respect. The moment hung between us. Both of us recognizing this was more than attorney-client relationship, neither rushing it. We exchanged personal cell numbers, not just office contacts. Made tentative plans for coffee again, maybe hiking when the weather improved. As we parted in the parking garage, Ruth touched my arm briefly. The next few weeks might get harder. Clifford knows he's lost legal options. People do unpredictable things when cornered. Call me if anything happens. Office or cell, doesn't matter. I nodded. Driving back to my apartment, I felt something unfamiliar. Not just the satisfaction of legal victory, but the warmth of genuine human connection. Someone who saw me not as a wallet or an obstacle, but as a person worth knowing. As I pulled into my apartment's parking lot, phone showing Ruth's number now saved under Ruth Cell, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in the middle of this fight. The possibility that losing my old life might mean finding a better one. The 30-day deadline arrived on a Tuesday morning, and when my phone showed no messages from Clifford or Alma, I knew exactly what it meant. They weren't leaving voluntarily. I texted Ruth early. They didn't leave. Her response came within seconds. Expected. Time for formal eviction filing. Courthouse at 10. This was the next phase, moving from notice to legal enforcement. At the Multnomah County Courthouse filing window, Ruth and I submitted the formal eviction complaint. I wrote a check for $285. Watched the clerk stamp our documents with an official court date 3 weeks out. Early June, the final confrontation. He'll fight this, I said as we walked back to the parking garage. Of course he will. Ruth tucked the stamped copies into her briefcase. But Eldon, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. If he's this desperate to stay, there's more we don't know. She recommended a forensic accountant, Gerald Martinez, someone she'd worked with before. $2,000 retainer for 3 days of investigation. I hired him that afternoon. 2 days later, Gerald called with findings that explained everything. Mr. Cruz, your son-in-law used that landscaping contract, the one you helped him secure, as collateral for a $95,000 loan from a predatory lending company. I sat down hard in my apartment chair. He used the contract I gave him. Yes, the money went toward opening something called Clifford Real Estate Group. The business failed within 6 months. Now he can't complete the original landscaping work, faces a breach of contract lawsuit from the commercial client, and the lender is pursuing collection on the defaulted loan. After hanging up, I stared at the wall for a long time. He'd used my reputation, my professional connections, as collateral for a scam. At Ruth's office the next day, we reviewed Gerald's complete report. Documentation of the loan, the failed business registration, the mounting legal actions against Clifford. This explains everything, Ruth said, flipping pages. He's not just broke. He's facing multiple lawsuits and possibly fraud charges if he misrepresented his ability to complete that contract. What do we do with this information? Ruth looked up. We can anonymously, through proper legal channels, inform his creditors and the contract client about his current housing situation. Increases pressure, forces his hand. I hesitated. This felt aggressive. Different from simply reclaiming my house. Ruth read my expression. He threatened to take Emma from you. He threw you from your own house. This is justice, not revenge. He created this situation. We're just making sure the consequences find him. I nodded slowly. Do it. Ruth drafted anonymous but factual letters, routing them through legal service companies to maintain plausible deniability. The pressure was about to increase from multiple directions. 2 days later, near midnight, my phone rang. Alma, I almost didn't answer, then reconsidered. Her voice was wrecked when I picked up. Dad, I need to talk to you. Clifford doesn't know I'm calling. I set down my pen, sat on the edge of my bed. What happened? Her story tumbled out. A creditor had showed up at the house that afternoon, demanding payment. When Alma asked Clifford what it was about, he tried to dismiss it. She pressed. He finally admitted to the loan, the failed business venture, the mounting debts. But he blamed me. Claimed if I hadn't abandoned them, none of this would have happened. He lied to me, Alma said, her crying turning to anger. For months. We're drowning in debt I didn't know about. I thought we were struggling because real estate was slow. He told me your help with the contract would solve everything. Her voice broke. Dad, I'm so sorry. I chose him over you. I let him throw you out of your own house, and the whole time he was lying to both of us. This was different. Not manipulation, not pleading, actual recognition of what she'd done. Alma, what are you going to do? Long pause. I don't know. I have Emma to think about. I can't just leave with nowhere to go. I closed my eyes. The eviction hearing is in 2 weeks. You need to prepare. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while. Then texted Ruth. Alma called. She's learning about Clifford's debts. She's breaking. Her response, can I come by? Not lawyer stuff, just checking in? 20 minutes later, Ruth arrived with takeout containers. Chinese food, nothing fancy. We sat on my small couch, eating from cardboard boxes. How are you really doing? She asked. I considered the question honestly. 3 months ago, I was living in my house, helping my family, thinking I was doing the right thing. Now I'm in a studio apartment, fighting them in court. My daughter just apologized for the first time. I don't know if I should feel victorious or just tired. Ruth set down her container. You can feel both. You can be right and still hurt. She told me about her husband's final days, how she'd learned that doing the hard thing doesn't mean it stops being hard. I talked about my wife, about the years of learning to be alone. The conversation was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with strategy or legal maneuvering. When she left near midnight, she paused at my door. You're doing the right thing, but it's okay if it doesn't feel easy. It's getting more complicated. The right things usually do. After she left, I stood at my studio window overlooking Portland's downtown lights. My phone showed Alma's contact still on screen. In my house across town, she was discovering her husband's betrayals. Clifford was fielding calls from creditors and lawyers. The landscaping client had likely received notice about his inability to perform. The eviction hearing loomed 2 weeks away. Everything was converging. Through my studio window, Portland's lights blurred in the late-night drizzle, and somewhere across town in my house, 3 people were facing truths they could no longer ignore, including the fact that in 2 weeks, a judge would decide who stayed and who left. The 2 weeks before the eviction hearing passed in a strange rhythm. Business meetings during the day, legal preparation in the evenings, and 3 nights that felt more like dates than strategy sessions with Ruth. Dinner at a quiet restaurant where we talked more about classic films than courtroom tactics. A walk along the Willamette River waterfront as the sun set. An evening at her house watching Casablanca, sitting close on her couch, her head briefly resting on my shoulder during the final airport scene. Nothing rushed, but undeniably deepening. Alma texted twice more. Tentative messages. Can we talk before the hearing? And I need advice about something important. I responded carefully, not encouraging dependence, but not shutting her down either. The morning of the hearing, I woke early in my studio apartment, put on my best suit, navy, white shirt, conservative tie, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, 64 years old, fighting to reclaim my own house for my own family. Surreal. I met Ruth at the courthouse an hour before the hearing. She wore a sharp charcoal suit, carried her organized binder. In a conference room, we reviewed strategy one final time. Remember, she said, Clifford's lawyer will try emotional appeals. Don't react. Let me handle it. I'm ready. She touched my hand briefly. You are. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Family court division designed for these disputes. Ruth and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Clifford arrived with a different lawyer than before. This one looked even less prepared. Discount legal services wrinkled suit, thin folder. Then Alma entered, separately. She sat in the gallery behind Clifford, but not next to him. Wouldn't make eye contact with either of us. The positioning told the whole story. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, the same woman from the preliminary hearing. She recognized the case immediately. The Cruz eviction matter. Counselors, let's proceed efficiently. Clifford's attorney presented first. Pure emotional manipulation. Your Honor, we're talking about a young family with a 3-year-old child being thrown onto the street. Mr. Cruz is the child's grandfather. What kind of man evicts his own grandchild? Ruth stood. Objection. Facts, not speculation about character. Sustained. Counsel, stick to legal arguments. The lawyer floundered. Presented no real evidence, just claims about hardship and family bonds. Mentioned the oral agreement already dismissed at the preliminary hearing. 10 minutes, and Clifford's defense collapsed under its own weakness. Ruth's turn was methodical, calm, and precise. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Mr. Cruz owns the property outright. A deed entered as evidence. He provided proper 30-day notice. Notice entered as evidence. Defendants failed to vacate. She paused. However, Mr. Cruz is not heartless. He has repeatedly offered to allow his daughter and granddaughter to remain in the house if Mr. Clifford vacates. This offer has been rejected. Ruth projected emails on the courtroom screen. My offers to help Alma, all documented, all ignored. Additionally, Mr. Cruz is willing to provide his daughter with reasonable time to secure alternative housing and even financial assistance for deposits. But Mr. Clifford must leave. Defendants chose to remain together rather than accept this compromise. Judge Morrison made notes, then looked directly at Clifford. Is it true Mr. Cruz offered to let your wife and child stay if you left? Clifford shifted. He's trying to split up my family? That's not what I asked. Did he make that offer? Yes or no? Yes, but thank you. The judge turned to Alma. Mrs. Cruz, do you wish to make a statement? Alma stood. Her voice came quiet but clear. Your Honor, I would like to accept my father's offer. My daughter and I need time to find housing, but my husband should leave. The courtroom went silent. Clifford's head snapped toward her. What? Alma didn't look at him. Judge Morrison nodded. Given the circumstances, I order defendants to vacate the property within 14 days. However, I'm willing to allow Ms. Alma Cruz and her minor child to remain temporarily under Mr. Eldon Cruz's discretion while she secures housing. Mr. Clifford Cruz must vacate immediately. The gavel struck. In the courthouse hallway, Clifford exploded at Alma. You're siding with him? After everything? Alma's voice stayed quiet but firm. After everything you lied about, the business, the debt, using Emma as a weapon, I'm done. Ruth and I stood several feet away. Clifford noticed us, started to approach. Ruth stepped slightly forward. Protective stance. Clifford stopped. Realized he had no move left. He looked at me with pure hatred. You destroyed my life. I kept my voice calm. No. You did that yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy mine. He turned and walked away. Alone. After he left, Alma approached me tentatively. Dad, can we talk? Ruth gave us space, moving down the hallway. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Alma said, tears streaming. I chose him over you. I was weak and stupid and scared, but I need help. For Emma, not for me. I know I don't deserve it, but she shouldn't suffer for my mistakes. I saw my daughter clearly for the first time in years. Not the woman who betrayed me, the frightened person who made terrible choices. I opened my arms. Alma collapsed into them, sobbing. You can stay, I said quietly. Both of you, until you're back on your feet. But things will be different. She nodded against my shoulder. Thank you. I'll make it right, I promise. That evening I drove to Ruth's house for dinner, something we'd planned before knowing the hearing's outcome. Her house was modest but warm, garden visible through the back windows, carefully maintained. I told her about Alma's decision, the judge's ruling, Clifford's exit. How do you feel? She asked. I considered. Relieved, sad, hopeful, all at once. That's honest. We sat on her deck as the summer evening faded, drinking wine, watching light fade over her garden. What happens now? Ruth asked. I move back home in 2 weeks. Help Alma figure out her life. Rebuild relationships. I looked at her. And I'd like to see where this goes, if you're interested. Ruth smiled. I'm very interested. The evening settled around us, comfortable and full of possibility. As the evening light faded over Ruth's garden, and our conversation drifted from legal victories to hiking plans and favorite books, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my house. I was building something new from the ruins of what I'd lost. 14 days after the court ruling, I stood in my own driveway for the first time in 4 months, watching Clifford throw boxes into his truck with the kind of angry carelessness that told me this wouldn't be easy. Ruth's advice echoed, document everything. I walked through each room with my phone camera raised, filming systematically. Clifford loading boxes, disputed items, the condition of my house. In the living room, I found him holding my vintage lamp, the one I'd bought at an estate sale 12 years ago. That stays, I said calmly. He turned, face reddening. Taking what's mine. That lamp stays. The tools in the garage stay. Take only what you brought. You can't tell me. I held up my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken before he moved in. Try me. He set the lamp down hard enough that I winced. An hour later, I caught him loading my landscaping equipment into his truck. Professional-grade trimmer, mower, edger, thousands of dollars worth. I called the non-emergency police line. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them documentation. Photos, receipts, the court order specifying Clifford must vacate. Sir, one officer said to Clifford, professional but firm, take only your personal belongings. The court order is clear. Clifford tried to argue, but they weren't interested. One officer stayed to supervise the rest of his packing. By evening, Clifford had loaded far less than he'd hoped. He stood in the driveway, glaring at me with the officer still present. You'll regret this. You destroyed my family. I kept my voice level. You destroyed your own family when you lied to them. I just stopped letting you destroy mine. He drove away alone. 3 days later, Alma met with a family lawyer Ruth had recommended. Not Ruth herself, conflict of interest, but someone reputable. She filed for divorce, irreconcilable differences and financial deception. She requested primary custody of Emma, with supervised visitation for Clifford. The same week, she returned to work. She'd kept her nursing license current, found a part-time position at a Portland clinic, 3 days a week. I helped with Emma on her workdays. The house slowly transformed, from war zone back to home. Late nights, Alma and I talked at the kitchen table after Emma was asleep. Honest conversations about fear, manipulation, weakness, what it means to choose dignity over false peace. One evening, she asked me to sit on the back porch. Emma was asleep upstairs. I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it. Her voice was steady despite tears. I was terrified of being alone. After Emma was born, I felt trapped. Clifford made me feel like I couldn't survive without him. So when he said jump, I asked how high. Even when it meant betraying you. She looked at me directly. You were the one person who never manipulated me, never made me doubt myself, and I threw you away because I was scared. Fear makes us do things we never imagined, I said, but you made a different choice in that courtroom. That's what matters. You taught me something. Alma wiped her eyes. Fairness isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't abandonment. I'm teaching Emma that now. By late July, Ruth had become a regular presence. Dinner twice a week. Sunday afternoons helping Emma with a garden project in the backyard. Emma adored her, called her Miss Ruth, asked when she was coming over next. The relationship between Ruth and me deepened naturally, comfortable, stable, built on mutual respect and shared values. Meanwhile, Clifford's financial situation became public spectacle. The commercial client whose landscaping contract he'd failed to complete filed lawsuit. $180,000 plus damages. 3 creditors filed judgments. The Oregon Real Estate Agency opened investigation into complaints. His license was suspended pending review. Word spread through the local real estate community. His professional reputation was demolished. He posted bitter messages on social media, blaming me. But they read as desperate deflection. Nobody believed him. Late July evening, I sat alone in my living room. Emma and Alma were asleep upstairs. Ruth had gone home but would return tomorrow. I thought about Clifford, probably in some cheap apartment, buried in debt, professionally ruined, separated from his daughter. I'd expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt only peace. Not the peace of crushing an enemy, the peace of restored order. I didn't destroy Clifford. His lies, his fraud, his manipulation did that. I simply stopped being collateral damage. I texted Ruth, "Thank you for everything." Her response came quickly. "You did the hard part. I just showed you the tools." I typed back, "Tools are useless without the will to use them." Ruth, "Then we make a good team." The last weekend of July, the 3 of us worked in the garden. Emma with her toy shovel, Alma planting marigolds and petunias, me spreading mulch, kneeling in the dirt, hands in soil. The work I loved. Emma looked up. "Grandpa, why did Daddy leave?" First time she'd asked directly. Alma glanced at me, uncertain. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people. Your daddy made some of those choices, but your mom made a brave choice to keep you safe and happy. That's what matters. Emma seemed satisfied, returned to digging. Alma mouthed, "Thank you," across the garden bed. The afternoon sun was warm. For the first time in months, The house felt like home. As Emma pressed her small handprint into the fresh soil beside the marigolds we'd just planted, Alma smiled at me across the garden bed, and I realized we weren't just restoring the garden. We were planting the seeds of something better than what we'd lost. The marigolds and petunias we'd planted in July were blooming now, and as I stood on my deck watching Ruth laugh with Emma through the kitchen window, I realized the garden wasn't the only thing that had taken root. Early August evening, Emma's 4th birthday was tomorrow. Tonight, a pre-celebration dinner, just family. I grilled vegetables and chicken on my deck, skills from years of hosting. Inside, Ruth helped Emma frost cupcakes, Emma's hands covered in pink icing, Ruth laughing at the mess. Alma set the table, moving easily between kitchen and deck. The scene was domestic, comfortable, nothing like the tension that had filled this house 5 months ago. Through the window, I watched, my daughter happy, my granddaughter giggling, and Ruth, someone who became family, and not through blood, but through choice and time. We sat for dinner as summer evening light slanted across the deck. Emma chattered about party plans. Between bites, Alma shared news. I found an apartment, 2 bedrooms, good school district, 20 minutes from here. She was nervous, watching for my reaction. That's wonderful, I said genuinely. When's move-in? September 1st. I've been saving from my paychecks, but... She hesitated. I'd like to help with the deposit. Dad, you've already... $8,000. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. But I'm calling it a gift. Her eyes filled. Thank you. For everything, Ruth added quietly. You're doing the hard work. The apartment is just the next step. After Emma ran inside to play, the 3 adults remained at the table. Alma looked at me. I need to say something I've been practicing. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't protect you. When Clifford told you to leave, I should have stood up. Instead, I nodded like a coward. Her voice stayed steady despite tears. You taught me what dignity looks like. You didn't yell or break things or play victim. You just stood up for yourself, legally and fairly. I'm teaching Emma that now, that boundaries aren't mean. They're necessary. I reached across the table, took her hand. You learned it when it mattered. That courtroom moment when you chose differently. That's when you became the mother Emma needs. Ruth mentioned she'd heard through professional channels. Clifford filed bankruptcy last week. Chapter 7, liquidating everything. Moved to Nevada, trying to start over where his reputation hadn't followed yet. The Oregon real estate agency revoked his license permanently. Court-ordered visitation with Emma was supervised, limited to video calls twice monthly until he completed parenting classes and financial counseling. He hadn't completed a single session. Part of me feels guilty, Alma said. He's lost everything. He lost everything because of his own choices, I said. You didn't create his debts. You didn't lie to clients. You didn't throw your father-in-law from his own home. He did those things. Ruth nodded. Consequences aren't punishment. They're just the natural result of actions. He can rebuild if he chooses, just not at someone else's expense. Emma went to bed around 8. Alma tucked her in upstairs. Ruth and I alone on the deck, Portland's city lights visible in the distance. This is nice, Ruth said, being part of this. You are part of this. Emma asks about you every day. Alma trusts you, and I paused. Ruth smiled. Yes? I didn't expect to find someone again. After my wife died, I thought that chapter was closed. I thought the same, Ruth said. Then a 64-year-old landscape architect walked into my office with a property dispute and determination I hadn't seen in years. We sat in comfortable silence. Then, I'm not suggesting we rush anything, but I want you to know, this isn't casual for me. It's not casual for me either, Ruth said. We have time to figure out what it becomes. Alma returned to the deck. Emma called down from her bedroom window. Grandpa, Miss Ruth, dance. A game we'd started last week. Emma loved watching us dance to music from my old record player. I looked at Ruth. Shall we? She laughed. Why not? I queued up the vintage player. Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. Ruth and I danced slowly on the deck under August stars. Alma watched from her chair, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Emma clapped from her window. The scene was simple but profound. A family rebuilt not on obligation or manipulation, but on respect, boundaries, and choice. As Ruth rested her head on my shoulder, my mind drifted through the past 5 months. March, thrown from my own home, betrayed by silence. April, learning to fight back legally. May, watching careful strategy work. June, courtroom victory that felt like restored order. July, new beginnings. August, standing here with a family constellation I'd never imagined. They pushed me out of my own house. I could have broken. Instead, I chose to stand up, not with revenge, but with justice. And in fighting for fairness, I found something I'd stopped hoping for. Love, respect, and family that's chosen rather than obligated. The song ended. Alma applauded softly. Emma had fallen asleep at her window, head on the sill. Ruth and I separated, still holding hands. I should head home, she said. You could stay. Guest room. Ruth considered, smiled. Let's take it one day at a time. But yes, I'd like that. I'll make up the guest bed, Alma said, heading inside. I stood alone on my deck for a moment. My house, my daughter healing, my granddaughter safe. A woman who saw me not as a resource, but as a partner. The garden thriving, the evening warm. Everything I fought for wasn't behind me. Standing alone on my deck for just a moment, I looked at the thriving garden, the warm lights from inside, and the August stars above, and I understood that what I'd fought for wasn't behind me. It was right here, blooming in the present and stretching into a future I finally got to choose. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.